Breaking right now on Morning News Now, travel chaos. A massive fire forces the closure of London's Heathrow Airport, diverting flights already in the air and causing hundreds of cancellations and delays worldwide. Now, officials warning the disruption could last days. We have team coverage with the latest. Also this morning, promises and pushback as President Trump signs an executive order fulfilling his campaign pledge to dismantle the Department of Education.
We're going to shut it down and shut it down as quickly as possible. It's doing us no good.
Now it's up to Congress to officially shut down the agency. Meanwhile, top Democrats on a town hall tour as they work to regain support. Plus spring showers and then some. This morning, millions of people bracing for more severe weather after days of severe storms. We're tracking the conditions, the dangers, and what to expect for your weekend. And busted. We're just one day into March Madness, but already millions of people are crumpling up their brackets and lobbing them straight into the trash. More on the big upsets from round one so far, plus how a little bit of math could help you with your women's brackets before you lock those in today. How's yours doing?
I'm in fourth place in the NBC News Now pool, so I'm doing okay so far. I'm feeling confident after one day.
Not in the pool.
There you go. So you can say you're not in last place.
Exactly.
Good to have you with us on a Friday. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. We're going to begin this morning with a major travel crisis impacting global flights. One of the world's busiest airports, that's London's Heathrow, it was forced to close for all of today after a fire at a nearby electrical substation knocked out its power.
The airport is urging travelers to stay away as crews work to restore power. In a statement, the airport says to maintain the safety of our passengers and colleagues, we have no choice but to close Heathrow. We expect significant disruption over the coming days, and passengers should not travel to the airport under any circumstances until the airport reopens. Because Heathrow is a major international hub, this is having a domino effect. The closure is causing chaos all around the world, with more than 1,300 flights affected so far. And as that statement I read suggests, it could take days for everything to get back to normal. We have full team coverage of this developing story. Tourism and Aviation Leadership Advisor Anita Menendez is standing by. First, so let's go to our international correspondent, Raf Sanchez, who is at Heathrow Airport.
Hey there, London's Heathrow Airport, normally one of the busiest in the world, but this morning this is as close as you can get, and we are already seeing travel chaos worldwide as a result of its closure. U.S. passengers from coast to coast seeing their travel plans upended. Now, local authorities are saying that a fire broke out at a power plant near the airport early this morning. It knocked out electricity to the airport's 4 terminals, and it is forcing Heathrow's closure, authorities say, until at least midnight local time tonight. That is 8 p.m. Eastern, and we are going to be feeling the knock-on effects of this worldwide. Some 1,300 flights were scheduled to either take off or land at Heathrow today. Many of them are now going to be out of place for future flights. You can actually see on flight radar the moment that incoming planes in midair got the news that Heathrow was closed, some of them turning back to the East Coast, others diverting to other airports here in the London area, some dropping passengers off in Shannon. The travel advice from experts is to check with your airline directly if you think that your plans may be affected. The last time Heathrow was closed, 2010, as a result of that volcano in Iceland, sending a huge cloud of volcanic ash up into the air. That paralyzed global air travel for a week. And authorities here are warning that there may be days of severe disruption travel ahead.
All right, Raf, thank you so much. Let's bring in tourism and aviation expert Anita Menendez for more on this. Anita, thanks for joining us this morning. I mean, already no surprise, we've seen reports several airline carriers have been affected. Heathrow is one of the world's busiest airports. So what are the immediate impacts and also just the long-term consequences of a major airport closure like this?
Indeed. And thanks very much for having me. And I think importantly, it's a major airport closure, but it's also an area where 16,000 homes have been impacted as well. This airport closure, which admittedly happened at the best time for a worst case scenario, happened just before 3 a.m. this morning when Heathrow announced that they needed to shut down the airport. That was when one of the last flights landed. Before then, the curfew lifted and you'd have the 5:30, 6 a.m. landing of aircraft. So there was a window of opportunity to communicate to the global network from an aviation perspective that we have a problem and we need to start diversions or even stopping aircraft from departing from their point of departure. The implications are significant, but what is very, very good to know is that Heathrow is anticipating it will reopen by midnight tonight, so one can still plan forward. The implications are massive in terms of the disruption to passengers, to crew, to aircraft itself around the world. They're in positions that they're not supposed to be. We need to get them back, whether it's for the people landing here or even connecting. But on top of that, there are those that want to be able to depart tomorrow and arrive in tomorrow. So it's managing all of this together. Importantly, thankfully, aviation is one of the best ecosystems in the world to be able to manage this complexity of getting the world safely traveling once again. So it is about giving that time between now and midnight to be able to solve the short-term challenges and phase in the medium and long-term restoring of momentum of aviation.
What type of coordination is going on like this, like behind the scenes during a crisis between airlines and airports to try to minimize the disruptions to passengers?
It's such an important question that you ask, because ultimately, again, when there was notification from Heathrow that there was trouble, the coordination comes in terms of being able to create alternative landing areas for the aircraft that are landing based on capability of handling, especially the larger long-haul aircraft, the 787s, the A380s. All of that needs to be managed carefully. On top of that, it's the diversions as well as the rebookings. So there's a huge complex management system. In tandem to that needs to be the communication. So communication to passengers, to alternative airports, to alternative transport systems. So as we've seen here in London, you've had subway lines like the Elizabeth line that would normally go straight to Heathrow has stopped going in. Because the last thing we want to do is, with people still hopeful that they will travel today, we need to not create bottlenecks, and not only bottlenecks of people, but bottlenecks of very, very cross emotion, as people naturally will be very frustrated. They will be very cross. They'll be very put out, literally and figuratively. So it's about managing all of that at the same time.
Anita, if you are traveling today or tomorrow and you're really not sure if this is going to affect you, just real quick, what's your best advice to folks?
I think the best advice right now, quite honestly, is be grateful you're on the ground and be grateful you have access to information from the airport and especially the airlines. The airlines are doing what they can to manage communicating to people exactly what they need to do and what to please not do. And for those travelers that are stranded, this is where duty of care kicks in and where airlines are looking at making sure that they can protect the passengers, whether it's through immediate needs of food and beverage, whether it's alternative accommodation, alternative transport, which might be airlines, it might be trains and road systems. So the airlines are working incredibly hard to be able to manage these sort of crises. And obviously the airlines as well and the airports have their emergency systems in place. They have their central operating units for crisis. So that has been mobilized. And it really is about all of us just waiting for the communication and trying not to be an additional disruption on top of that, as frustrating as this might be for everyone.
Some good advice there. All right, Anita Menendez, thank you for your time this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Here in the U.S. this morning, there are questions about the future of the Department of Education and its impact on students as President Trump takes steps to deliver on his campaign promise of dismantling it. The president signed an executive order yesterday directing Education Secretary Linda McMahon to begin the process of winding down her department. He cited American students' falling test scores as a reason.
The United States spends more money on education by far than any other country, and spends likewise by far more money per pupil than any country, and it's not even close. But yet we rank near the bottom of the list in terms of success. We're going to be returning education very simply back to the states where it belongs, and it's going to work.
The executive order comes after the department already cut its workforce in half earlier this month. The latest national report card shows 40% of fourth graders don't meet basic benchmarks for reading, despite increases in federal funding.
For more on this, let's bring in NBC News correspondent Rahima Ellis. Good morning. Thank you so much for being here on set with us. I want to start by reading something. This is from one of the teachers' unions, the president of the National Education Association. I want to read something he said in part. It says, this will hurt all students by sending class sizes soaring, cutting job training programs, and making higher education more expensive. What do we think? What do we know at this point about how this will impact students in schools?
What we know at this point is that it will have little practical impact on students immediately. For it to have an immediate impact, Congress would have to eliminate funding. And you heard the president say that there's not going to be any interruption services for those children who have some essential services. But people are really concerned because if you've cut the workforce at the Department of Education in half, then that means you can't have the kind of supply of services to children that you had before. I want to make a correction or point out something that the president said. He said that we spend more than any other country in the nation per pupil on students. We are fifth in the world in terms of our spending on pupils, behind Luxembourg, Austria, and South Korea. He also said that the nation's report card shows that we have done a terrible job at the Department of Education in terms of educating students. The nation's report card is basically part of what the Department of Education was formed to do 45 years ago. It was formed to centralize the gathering of information, data collection. The report card is a sign of the data that's going to be collected about what the states are doing in their particular districts in terms of educating children. The nation's report card is not an example of how the federal government is educating kids in our schools. The states do that. And when he says he's returning control of education to schools, states already have it, Joe.
When it comes to the critical functions, the White House says it's still going to leave in the Department of Education. What are those? And has the White House explained how that's actually going to happen with all of these massive cuts?
The White House has not explained how it's going to happen. We're talking about student loans, Pell Grants, services for children who have disabilities, also services for children with special needs. There are a lot of people out there who know what IEPs are, individualized education programs, for children with autism, ADD, ADHD, dyslexia. He says those services will not be interrupted. But there are a lot of people who are worried, again, because you've cut the staff. And it means that if you have an issue in your local school department that can't be resolved and you want some help from the federal government, there are fewer people now in the federal government to address those concerns.
How do we see this playing out? Does it head to court? I mean, especially as teachers' unions are saying they want to fight it.
Well, those unions are saying they do want to fight it, and they are fighting it, as well as many others who are in the Department of Education who were laid off. They've gone to court, too, to try and get their jobs back. So, yeah, I think this is something that's going to end up in court. And ultimately, Congress may be asked to sit down and make a decision to vote on this. But there seems very little appetite in Congress for doing this right now. It should be pointed out that 2/3 of the American public say they support the Department of Education. They don't want to see it disappear. And it takes an act of Congress that means 60 votes in the Senate. Republicans number 53 votes. And there seems to be no appetite for the Democrats to join a vote to demolish the Department of Education.
Such important reporting, certainly questions for parents. Thank you, and great to have you on set with us.
Nice to see you.
The Justice Department is facing a new deadline today to fully answer questions from a federal judge. He wants to know more about the controversial deportation flights of alleged Venezuelan gang members to El Salvador.
Yeah, the judge is seeking to determine if the White House defied his court order. On Thursday, he called previous answers to those questions, quote, woefully insufficient.
NBC News White House correspondent Aaron Gilchrist joins us now. So, Aaron, this was a pretty damning 3-page ruling by District Judge James Boasberg. He wants more information about these deportation flights. What is he saying about the government's response so far?
Yeah, this judge, the chief judge of the U.S. District Court here in D.C., basically said that the Department of Justice evaded its obligation to provide the information, really, that he's been asking for several days. Our understanding of what happened yesterday is that the Department of Justice submitted a declaration from an ICE regional director in Texas who essentially said that his understanding was that there were people at the secretary level who were having conversations about whether to evoke the state secrets privilege over the information that the judge has been requesting. He sent the government 5 questions, I think 5 or 6 questions, additional questions that he wanted answered by yesterday. And instead of getting those answers, he got this declaration from this low-level official. The judge said, as you indicated, that was woefully insufficient, that he needed to get a statement from someone who was actually a part of the conversations, who had direct knowledge that there were conversations about evoking the state secret's privilege over the information that he wants. And he demanded that declaration come to him by this morning. And so that's one of the things that we're waiting for, a statement there. And then the judge went a step further and told the government that he wanted their explanation, a written explanation of how they did not violate his order over the past weekend. And that was the order in which he said you need to turn these planes around and bring these immigrants back into the United States until he could make some rulings about the cases that were brought before him here, Joe and Savannah.
So, Aaron, what comes next? What are we hearing from the Justice Department about all this also?
Well, the response to the judge's request late yesterday really came from 2 places, from President Trump himself and from the Justice Department. The president basically trashed the judge's ruling yesterday. He called it ridiculous in a post on his social media site and said that the judge is doing everything in his power to usurp the power of the presidency. The Department of Justice put out a statement as well last night saying that this was judicial overreach for the judge to be trying to get his hands on information that the government believes he's not entitled to have, particularly if there is some national security, foreign policy element to this, as the Justice Department has claimed at points throughout this whole process, Joe and Savannah. And so we'll see where this lands. There is already an appeal to the judge's earlier restraining order and ruling in this case. That appeal is supposed to be heard on Monday at the Circuit Court Appeals Court here in D.C. All
right, we'll see what happens there. Aaron, thank you so much.
Well, we're learning new details this morning about allegations against a university student who was arrested by federal authorities earlier this week. The Justice Department alleges that the student was spreading, quote, terrorist propaganda while in the U.S. on a visa. As NBC News senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez reports, this latest arrest is adding to a growing debate about the limits of free speech.
Badar Khan Suri, a graduate student and father of 3 from India who was teaching at Georgetown University, is now accused of having ties to a terror group. But a federal judge temporarily blocked his deportation after the ACLU filed an emergency motion.
Freedom of speech in this country should never be limited, and it should never be chilled by the government.
But the idea that somehow he is a threat to our national security because of, his views on the Israel-Palestine conflict is just ridiculous.
But a spokesperson for the Department of Homeland Security says Suri was actively spreading Hamas propaganda and promoting anti-Semitism on social media. A U.S. official tells NBC News his father-in-law was a Hamas advisor. Georgetown University says it's not aware of Suri engaging in illegal activity and that he was granted a visa to the United States to continue his doctoral research on peace building in Iraq and Afghanistan. The Trump administration is using a law that grants the Secretary of State power to deport visa holders whose presence has adverse foreign policy consequences.
We will continue to look for people that we would never have allowed into this country on student visas had we known they were going to do what they've done.
Meanwhile, Columbia University is now signaling it'll comply with the Trump administration's demands in return for restoring $400 million in federal funding, canceled because the White House accused Columbia of continued inaction in the face of persistent harassment of Jewish students. During pro-Palestinian protests, campus buildings were occupied and vandalized. Jewish student Shoshana Ofstein says she was trapped inside one of them.
There comes a point where speech is, it's not protected speech anymore if you're inciting violence, if you're supporting terrorism.
As for the Georgetown graduate student, his lawyer says he's done nothing wrong and that he's still in custody at a detention facility in Louisiana. Gabe Gutierrez, NBC News, Washington.
All right, Gabe, thank you.
All these political headlines are roiling emotions, which is why lawmakers on both sides of the aisle are facing voters' fury at some passionate town hall meetings.
Yeah, from Republicans angry at President Trump and Elon Musk's government cuts to Democrats frustrated at their party's perceived lack of fight, the political backlash is growing.
Here to talk more about all this, NBC News senior national politics reporter Jonathan Allen. John, good to have you with us. So first of all, talk to us about what you've been seeing at these Republican town halls. What have been some of the common themes and reactions to the point where we're seeing a lot of Republicans just not have in-person town halls anymore?
Yeah, good morning, Joe. Good morning, Savannah. We started seeing that actually, I guess, a couple of weeks ago, where you had some town hall meetings that got a little bit rowdy, and Republican lawmakers were getting advice from, from party leaders to tell them, hey, don't hold these things. Don't expose yourself to this. But in terms of the common themes, there's a lot of frustration about Doge in particular, about Elon Musk, usually not aimed entirely at him, but about the cuts that are happening as a result of Doge. People are worried that they're not going to get the benefits that they usually get from the government, not going to be able to access services, whether that's from the Veterans Administration, where basically the phone lines need to be open. There need to be veterans healthcare workers available to folks. They're worried about Social Security. Elon Musk keeps saying he wants to cut Social Security. Donald Trump says he doesn't, but Musk keeps saying they need to eliminate the program entirely, and he's already starting to shut field offices and close off phone services. So there are a lot of concerns from constituents that are being aired, and a lot of times, fairly aggressively, just in terms of being vociferous. So you see members of Congress getting shouted down. On the Democratic side, basically, Democratic constituents want their lawmakers to fight harder.
John, yesterday we were talking with Ali Vitale about what she was seeing firsthand. She just went to one of these Democratic town halls where voters are expressing their frustration, especially at Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. And then yesterday we also saw two of the party's biggest progressives, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, also Senator Bernie Sanders, joining forces for town halls in Nevada and Arizona. This was dubbed Fight Oligarchy. I know you've co-written a piece about this, but what do you think about someone like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez stepping into some type of leadership void to galvanize Democrats? Could that tactic work?
Well, look, she's one of the most controversial members of Congress, which is a double-edged sword, right? There are a lot of Democrats who don't like her. There are more Republicans who don't like her. And at the same time, as a result of that controversy, as a result of some of the sort of arrows that come her way, you can see that she's a powerful force within the Democratic Party. And you can see as she travels with Bernie Sanders that they're getting big crowds, that there's energy. Look, I think the Democrats, if they can figure out the best use for AOC, or if she can find the right niche for herself, and I'm not saying what that is, but maybe it's in a primary against Chuck Schumer in 4 years, maybe it's a presidential run, or maybe it's a leadership role in the House. She obviously has the ability to attract attention to a message.
John, I'm going to tap into some of your experience here. Have you seen a time when constituents from both major parties have been this vocal, this angry about the political situation at the same time?
Not that I recall instantly. Typically, it's one side or the other. The best parallel I could think of is the Tea Party summer of 2010, when you had Republicans showing up at Democratic town halls and shouting down their members. But let's just put it this way. I would say for the last quarter century, the American public has been angry at its government for not delivering what the public wants. And the problem with that is the public is divided over what it wants.
Yeah. All right. John Allen, thank you so much as always. Appreciate it. Millions of people across the country are cleaning up after a powerful early spring storm system. A reported 10 tornadoes touched down across the Midwest. We're going to show you the scene in Gary, Indiana, where roofs were ripped off homes and businesses. In Florida, wildfires are raging across the southern part of the state, spreading near Miami-Dade and closing at least one of the roads to the Keys. On top of that, a patchwork of snowstorms, rock slides, and dust storms moved across the Northeast and the Southwest. Let's take a closer look at what to expect now with your Morning News Now weather.
Angie Lassman joins us in studio. Hey, Angie, good morning.
Hi, guys. Good morning. Happy Friday to you. We've got another storm system that we're now watching. So let's head over to the West Coast, where we've already got some of this moisture kind of streaming on in for our friends in the Pacific Northwest. That's where we're going to gear up to see some heavy rain, some heavy snow, and potentially gusty winds, specifically making travel difficult across those mountainous regions. This is the area that's going to be busy today, but notice what happens by the time we get into tomorrow. A lot of this works across the Rockies and the plains, and we will ramp up the chance for some snow showers and some rain showers across those northern high plains, but also the potential for maybe a kind of a generally strong storm or two to develop across parts of the Midwest, specifically Missouri into Kansas. We could see a couple of those. That severe potential really ramps up, though, as we get into Sunday, and the system works east. And we've got multiple kind of impacts from this for our plans, especially any outdoor plans you might have across this region on Sunday. So first things first, we've got that snow across, again, the upper Midwest stretching down into the Great Lakes. We've got some heavy rain for the Ohio Valley, and then we've got a slight risk for severe storms to develop across parts of essentially the Tennessee Valley stretching down to the plains. So anywhere from Kentucky to Texas could see the chance to see a couple of stronger storms. Now, the biggest impacts are going to be the hail and the winds, but I wouldn't rule out a tornado or two as this system works its way to the east. We mentioned that we've had difficulty with the fire weather over the past really week or so, and that unfortunately continues today and likely into the weekend. Here's what we're looking at now as far as those alerts. 22 million people. We've got them across the plains, we've got them across the Rockies, and of course we have them still in place for the east coast of Florida, stretching from Orlando to Miami. Those red flag warnings and fire weather watches are going to stay in effect today. Here's what we look for as far as our fire weather threats today. It's focused the critical risk mainly over Texas. And then as we get into tomorrow, you can see, again, Texas and New Mexico. So kind of the same areas that we've really been looking at, really low humidity levels, gusty winds. We're going to see those lasting. By the time we get into tomorrow, your Saturday, it looks like most of the country will be quite bright. We'll have a lot of sunshine east of the Rockies, a little bit of that snow and rain across the plains and the Rockies. But otherwise, the Southwest looks sunny. The Northeast looks sunny. We've got lots of sunshine for the Great Lakes, too. And our temperatures will be kind of on the mild side for the southern tier of the country. We've got 70s, we've got 80s. Some spots in Texas could reach near 90 degrees. And we'll see those 70s kind of lasting for the southeast into Sunday, Joe. But unfortunately, that's when we ramp up that severe weather and the snow from the Great Lakes to the Gulf Coast.
All right. That rain caught me off guard last night.
Did it?
I didn't bring the umbrella. I forgot.
God.
Oh, all right. Thanks, Angie. Appreciate it. Much more to come here on Morning News. Now, later this hour, what's that racket? Must be your bracket. That's right, March Madness is off to a rough start for millions of fans after some upsets. But could a little math help save your women's brackets before those are due today? We're going to break down the odds. Up first, Israel intensifying its attacks after breaking a ceasefire with Hamas. We are going to bring you the latest from Gaza next. Stay with us. We're back with Israel's ramped up attacks on Gaza since breaking its ceasefire with Hamas earlier this week. Palestinian health officials say more than 45 people were killed during airstrikes yesterday. 2 pregnant women and their young children were among the dead, their families told NBC News. Humanitarian aid and electricity into Gaza remains blocked. Hamas responded yesterday by firing rockets into Israel, the first retaliatory strikes since Israel launched this new phase of the war. NBC News international correspondent Matt Bradley joins us now from Tel Aviv with the latest. Matt, good morning. So these retaliatory strikes from Hamas, have they had any impact on Israel so far?
It's a great question, Joe. And in fact, it looks as though they've actually inflamed Israel even more. We just heard from the Minister of Defense, Israel Katz, today. He said that any land that the Israelis take in Gaza will now become permanently annexed to Israel. We've heard, comments like this made in the past by members of the Israeli cabinet, this far-right government that's executing this war. But this is a very strong statement saying that unless the Hamas leadership releases the remaining hostages, of whom several dozen are left, dead and alive, that Israel is going to start taking this land and holding it permanently. So that's a big step up in rhetoric. And as we speak, the Israelis are expanding their ground operations in the Gaza Strip as well. So it looks as though those retaliatory strikes by Hamas really have done little more than inflame the situation.
Yeah, so Matt, as the IDF forces push deeper into Gaza, ramp up these airstrikes, do we know what the situation is like for civilians on the ground there?
It's just awful, and this is what we keep hearing over and over again. Remember, even before these airstrikes were launched, before the airstrikes were launched by the Israelis against Gaza, and that was starting on Tuesday morning when they broke that treaty, the Israelis had already cut off aid into the Gaza Strip, which sent prices sky high for just ordinary goods. They also cut off electricity to a vital desalination plant that had been providing fresh water for Palestinians. And so the situation in the Gaza Strip, which was dire before the truce came into effect in late January, had seen a little bit of a reprieve when we started seeing more and more aid coming in, even though Hamas had said, and Palestinians in Gaza had said that there wasn't nearly enough coming in and it wasn't meeting the terms of the agreement. Now it looks as though the situation has become even more pitiable for the more than 2 million Palestinians living in the Gaza Strip.
And Matt, as Israel targets Hamas, the U.S. says it will continue its sustained campaign against the Iran-backed Houthis until they no longer pose a threat to shipping. It's been nearly a week since President Trump launched that first wave of strikes on Yemen. What impact have they had on the rebel group so far, and how is Iran responding to this?
Yeah, well, it sounds as though the Iranians have repeatedly said that they are not part of the Houthi enterprise. You know, Iran has a complicated relationship with its proxies throughout the region. Sometimes they do claim sort of kinship with them, and other times they try to distance themselves. The Iranians haven't really claimed ownership over the Houthis' attacks against Israel and against shipping in the Red Sea. But we did hear from Ayatollah Khamenei, the leader of Iran, and he said that Americans and others should know that if they commit any act of hostility against Iran, they will receive a harsh slap. We are not the ones to start a conflict, but we will strike back at the enemy. So this is clearly a threat not really related so much to the Houthis, which, again, as you mentioned, the Americans are bombing them as of today still. But this is more of a threat against any attack on Iran itself, which is something that, we've been hearing bandied about throughout the region. The Israelis certainly seem like they are putting Iran in the crosshairs, and that's the kind of conversations that we're hearing from within the halls of power here. Whether or not that actually ends up being a direct strike against Iran itself, like the kind we saw last year, we don't know.
All right. Matt Bradley in Tel Aviv. Matt, thank you so much. Among the many victims of the war in Gaza, children with treatable forms of cancer. But some of them are dying because they can't get the medical care they need. NBC News has been following a secret U.S. effort since the war began to save hundreds of these kids. NBC's Andrea Mitchell has this exclusive report.
The youngest victims in Gaza, these children injured, also desperate for treatment. Palestinian children with cancer, like these kids leaving Khan Yunis and heading to hospitals in Italy. And this rescue operation finally bringing the first cancer patients to the U.S. We were there as they arrived. 12-year-old Lean and her family, and 17-year-old Nesma and her mom on a humanitarian flight from Cairo. A program NBC News has been following since the war began that has now rescued 240 children, including kids we saw in Egypt after their hospital in Gaza was bombed in November 2023. 20 more children got out in June of 2024. Spearheaded by Biden Chief of Staff Jeff Zients, a team from St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, and Palestinian doctors on the ground. Getting the children out of Gaza was incredibly difficult, with urban warfare and for months only one exit, which shut down when Israel's tanks invaded Rafah for an operation against Hamas last May. Doctors say 12 children died waiting for Israeli security clearances. After the U.S. election, one doctor made a personal appeal to Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who went to President Trump, the president tasking Special Envoy Steve Witkoff to help the kids. How did you cut through the red tape?
No matter what side of the battle lines you're on here, these are young kids, and they needed to get proper care.
Now the first children are in the U.S. What does that mean now?
I think it means so much. Maybe one day someone's going to remind them about all these wonderful things that happen, and that'll be a bridge. Like there's just too much hatred in that region.
This remarkable wartime mission, started by one White House, carried on by another, continues, despite the renewed fighting. 6 more children in Gaza have been diagnosed with cancer and need care.
All right, Andrea, thank you so much. Coming up, terror on the tarmac. New information about the moments before a Delta flight landed belly up at Toronto Airport. What investigators say may have gone wrong. And collapse concerns. The new report about how Baltimore's Key Bridge fell apart and why that is raising questions about the safety of other structures. This is Morning News Now.
We're
We're back with a new preliminary report that's giving us some insight into the fiery plane crash in Toronto last month. The report shows that the plane was going twice as fast as it should have been just seconds before landing. NBC News correspondent Emily Ikeda shows us what's in the report.
Yo, I was just on this plane.
A month after a Delta plane flipped over on a snowy Toronto runway, Canadian authorities releasing new details on the harrowing moments on board the regional jet, now moved into a nearby airplane hangar for investigation. The preliminary report says less than 3 seconds before touching down, an alert sounded indicating a high rate of descent to the pilots, 1,100 feet per minute.
Just how hard did the plane hit the ground?
This was probably at least twice of what the normal rate of descent would be. So all of that force was concentrated in one area, which was far above what that component was designed for.
The plane came down hard at a steep angle on the right main landing gear, which partially broke and retracted. The right wing detached, releasing a cloud of jet fuel, which caused that fire as the plane rolled over and skidded down the runway.
Drop it. Come on.
The crash left passengers like Pete Kukov hanging upside down in their seats, suspended by their safety belts.
I remember just hanging there, and me and the lady next to me, we got out pretty quick.
Remarkably, all 80 people on board survived. Delta says it remains fully engaged in the ongoing investigation into the cause of the terrifying crash landing.
Alarming incident playing out Thursday morning. Authorities say a Southwest plane headed from Orlando to Albany started its takeoff roll on the taxiway instead of the runway, which run parallel to one another. Southwest says the plane was able to stop safely and no one was injured. The FAA is now investigating. Back to you.
Emily, thank you so much. Another investigation is shedding new light on the deadly collapse of Baltimore's Key Bridge last year. The NTSB says Maryland authorities failed to review the bridge's vulnerability to collision before the tragedy. Now investigators are warning dozens of other bridges could be vulnerable to a similar disaster. NBC's Tom Costello has more.
Nearly 1 year after a Singapore-flagged container ship crashed into a support pier, bringing down Baltimore's Key Bridge, the NTSB said for decades, Maryland authorities failed to assess the bridge's vulnerability to a collision, despite contributing to the national guidelines that called for the assessments.
Had they done that, the collapse could have been prevented.
The NTSB warned many more bridges that ocean-going ships routinely pass under could also be at risk, naming 68 bridges that need urgent risk assessments, including some of America's most iconic, the Golden Gate and Coronado bridges in California, the Sunshine Skyway Bridge in Florida, the Huey P. Long, Crescent City, and Hale Boggs bridges in Louisiana, the Bay and Chesapeake bridges in Maryland, the Verrazano, Brooklyn, and GW bridges in New York, and many more, including in Ohio, Texas, and Massachusetts.
What we are telling bridge owners is that they need to know the risk and determine what actions they need to take to ensure safety.
Bridges built after 1994 must have vessel collision mitigations like protection islands around bridge supports. The Maryland Transportation Authority has not responded to NBC's request for comment. Maryland Governor Wes Moore says the new Key Bridge will be far more robust.
We are going to make sure that we are going to get this bridge built on time and on budget, and it is going to make sure that it leads up to all industry standards on safety.
With so many bridges at risk, now there's a national push to protect them from the kind of disaster that brought down Baltimore's Key Bridge.
All right, Tom, thank you. Coming up, officials are calling it an act of terror. Now a string of crimes targeting Teslas is being linked to multiple suspects. More on their arrests and the charges they face. This is Morning News Now. The wave of vandalism targeting Teslas is leading U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi to take action. She's calling the attacks domestic terrorism and issuing new charges against multiple suspects. Those charges include malicious destruction of property and arson. NBC News correspondent Liz Kreutz has more.
Attorney General Pam Bondi announcing federal charges against 3 people nationwide accused of using Molotov cocktails to set fire to Tesla cars and charging stations.
We have charged multiple people. Get ready, more coming.
Investigators saying these images show one of the suspects in Salem, Oregon, carrying an AR-15 style rifle while throwing an ignited device into a showroom. The Tesla Center saying it led to about $500,000 in damages. 2 others in Colorado and South Carolina also charged. Bondi writing, "Let this be a warning. If you join this wave of domestic terrorism against Tesla properties, the Department of Justice will put you behind bars." The attack's part of a growing movement to target Tesla as a form of protest against the company's CEO, Elon Musk, and his wide-reaching role in the Trump administration. This week, Teslas at a service center in Las Vegas also vandalized, and a website surfaced targeting individual Tesla owners, showing some names, personal contact information, and addresses for Tesla drivers, putting some owners on edge.
If I had known Elon was going to turn into what he kind of turned into, I don't know that I would have bought this car necessarily. But even so, people have good reasons to buy electric cars, and attacking people just because they own a Tesla doesn't seem like a good way to protest.
It's unclear who's behind the website, which appears to be taken down. Musk calling those behind the attacks bad people.
They want to hurt Tesla because we're stopping this terrible waste and corruption.
This all comes amid a difficult time for Tesla. Just today, the company recalling nearly all of its Cybertrucks over an exterior panel that can detach and increase the risk of a crash. Tesla's stock now down 50% since its high in December. Meanwhile, as the White House rallies behind the company, Trump Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick urging Americans to buy its stock, which some experts say is a potential violation of government ethics.
Buy Tesla. It's unbelievable that this guy's stock is this cheap. It'll never be this cheap again.
Liz Kreutz, NBC News.
More financial headlines now. FedEx and Nike are feeling the heat this morning. It looks like inflation and tariff woes are taking quite the toll. CNBC's Silvana Henao has that and some other money headlines. Silvana, good morning.
Hey, Joe, good morning. Happy Friday to you. Yes, so FedEx and Nike are the latest companies to sound warnings about the economy. So FedEx cutting its profit outlook for the year, citing the challenging backdrop, inflation pressures, and uncertainty over trade policies that's hurting demand. Nike expecting a steeper drop in sales this quarter as it continues to push discounts to clear out inventory. Nike also citing uncertainty from the impact of higher tariffs on imports from China and Mexico. DoorDash is teaming up with Klarna to offer buy now, pay later options. The delivery platform says it will integrate Klarna's payment options for buying groceries, retail, and its annual Dash Pass membership fee. So when customers check out, they'll be able to choose whether to pay in full and 4 equal interest-free installments or pay later to defer to another time. And the parent company of Edible Arrangements is launching a marketplace for other types of edibles, and it's opening edibles.com to sell hemp products such as canned drinks and Wana gummies. Now, the federal farm bill in 2018 legalized hemp, which is legally defined as a plant containing less than 1/3% of THC. Now, that's paved the way for companies to sell products with THC from hemp versus marijuana, even if some states haven't legalized marijuana, Joe.
All right, just make sure you get that order right before you send the gift to grandma, you know?
That's right.
That could be bad. Thanks, Savannah. Appreciate it.
Get it.
In the last few months, rapper Kendrick Lamar has won big at the Grammys, headlined the Super Bowl, and topped the charts. Well, now we could see him play a major role in the 2028 LA Olympics. NBC's Yasmin Vasugian has the details.
Just when you thought Kendrick Lamar couldn't get any bigger, now the head of the LA Olympics Committee saying he could play a role at the 2028 Summer Games. And the NFL releasing new stats on the most watched and perhaps most polarizing Super Bowl halftime show ever.
I'm prophetic. They talk about it. I did it.
3.65 billion total global views, the league says. It all comes after a Grammy Awards sweep, including Song and Record of the Year.
Nothing more powerful than rap music.
Not to mention the notorious spat with Drake this week. Their record label saying Drake, quote, lost a rap battle that he provoked. Now, with a stadium world tour beginning this spring alongside superstar SZA,
we have to pretty much go insane.
And a collaboration with the South Park creators on a feature film set to release this summer, the Pulitzer Prize-winning rapper Kendrick Lamar is on top of the world.
I got 25 lighters on my dresser.
Always a critical darling, Lamar is known for weaving together themes of morality and redemption while adopting intricate rhyme schemes. Now he's transcended into a commercial juggernaut. 3 of 4 Billboard's top 5 songs reaching a wider, global, whiter audience.
They not like us. They not like us.
So how did he pull it off?
When it comes to artist quality, some things are ineffable. Kendrick has that it factor.
Hip-hop journalist like Brian B. Miller says he recentered the focus, not just on hip-hop, which until recently took a cultural backseat to country and pop, but also conscious lyricism.
One of the best songwriters of all time. We hear a song like Swimming Pools. It's a great record, but it's about alcoholism. All right, it's a great record, but it's also a protest anthem. This is a guy who knows how to, touch people's soul.
It all feels centered within who he is, and it all feels very authentic. And not every star gets to do that. We understand that a lot of celebrities play the game.
A game actor Samuel Jackson, as Uncle Sam, referred to at the politically charged Super Bowl halftime show.
Too loud, too reckless, too ghetto. Mr. Lamar, do you really know how to play the game?
Not everyone was impressed, with right-wing commentators saying things like, quote, halftime show is trash, and it's clearly the regime's response to Trump's historic gains with black men, despite Lamar being booked way before Trump's win. Still, social media abuzz with dances.
It's a cultural divide. I'm going to get it on the floor. Yeah, I'm tripping, I'm sliding.
From some unexpected enthusiasts.
What's that on the beat, bro?
If you understand, and if you don't, you're not like us. So I think that messaging definitely cuts through to the masses. It's universal.
But all those new fans has a side effect. To see Lamar perform on his big tour means forking over a small fortune.
People are upset with Kendrick Lamar for the price of his tour.
Some even in tears over the prices before the Super Bowl.
$125 for nosebleeds is insane.
You can't find tickets to his New Jersey show for under $100 on Ticketmaster, raising the question if his OG fans will still get to see him.
You put Kendrick Lamar on the stage, you're going to get a Kendrick Lamar showing.
All eyes fixed on the 5'5" rapper now towering over the music industry.
Yasmin Vasugian, NBC News.
All right, coming up, pure madness. That's right, March Madness living up to its name with some upsets on day one of the men's tournament.
But it's not too late to save your women's brackets. We'll break down some stats that could give you a better shot. This is Morning News Now. Finally, this hour, we are digging into the data on one of the biggest sporting events of the year. Of course, we're talking about March Madness. Experts predict that Americans will legally bet more than $3 billion this year on both the men's and women's college basketball tournaments. That's a $400 million jump from last year.
The men's tournament got underway yesterday, and some of the day one upsets are already busting brackets from coast to coast. That being said, we wanted to figure out if there's a real tried and true method that might just produce the perfect bracket, or at least a winning bracket.
Let's bring in an expert. This is Professor Kevin Hudson. He teaches mathematics at Furman University in South Carolina. He's part of a small group of professors who've been crunching March Madness numbers for more than a decade. Kevin, this is so cool. Good morning. Thanks for joining us. Before we dive in to bracket building, we just want to know how you and your team even got started with using math to predict these March Madness outcomes.
Yeah, it all started with undergraduate students. So at Furman, we're primarily an undergraduate university, but we do a lot of undergraduate research with students. And we had a student that came to us and said, I'd like to do summer research with you, but I don't want to do that math stuff that you normally do. I would like to do sports analytics. And from that point, for the past decade, we've worked with students in summer research to build a pretty complicated model at this point. But each year, they add something new to the model. We learn something about analytics, and we've trained a generation of analysts now.
Wow. So the hardest part of building brackets every year is trying to predict the upsets, which happen every single day. Your team says there's math can be especially helpful with this. Your current model has, get this, 76% accuracy rate for so-called underdog matchups.
Wow.
Tell us what an underdog matchup is considered, and what are some of the factors that actually go into those predictions?
Yeah, so we only look at games in the tournament where there's a difference of 5 in the seeds. So we're not looking at 7-10 matchups or 8-9 matchups or anything like that. But there are specific characteristics for teams that make like a favorite play better in a tournament and an underdog play better in the tournament, et cetera, et cetera. So, for instance, the favorites play better typically when they are teams that can rebound the ball well and produce a lot of turnovers. So if you're a favorite, what you want to do is you want to sort of maximize the number of possessions so that you're able to show the underdog that you're the better team. When you're the underdog, there's actually different flavors of how they produce upsets. Some produce upsets by slowing the pace like down really, really slow so that they don't give the favorite a chance to break away from them. Where other underdogs shoot a lot of threes, and if they can make a lot of threes in a one-game setting, they have a good shot.
After day one of the men's tournament, it seems like the biggest upset here had to be 12-seed McNeese knocking out 5-seed Clemson. So was that one of your predictions?
It was, yeah. So there were two teams that we really liked in the first round, Drake and McNeese. They both pulled off upsets. By the way, I should also say we liked VCU and we liked UC San Diego. UC San Diego came close against Michigan, but VCU was a little bit of a disappointment. The Drake and McNeese State, those might be two teams to look at in the next round as well. They have some high probabilities of upsets against Purdue and Texas Tech.
So are you saying here, we only have a few seconds, your bracket's looking good so far?
It's been good, but it was busted after the first game.
Well, yeah.
So. Professor Kevin Essen, that is so cool. People should go look out if you want some tips. Thank you for joining us this morning. That was fun.
You're welcome.
I did have San Diego over Michigan. All right, that's going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now.
Stay with us, though. The news continues right now. Good morning and happy Friday. I'm Savannah Sellers.
I'm Joe Fryer. Right now on Morning News Now, grounded. London's vital Heathrow Airport shut down on this Friday morning. A massive electrical fire nearby triggering widespread power outages in one of the world's busiest transportation hubs. The shock waves felt across the globe and on runways here in the U.S. President Trump's long-touted campaign promise of dismantling the Department of Education closer to reality. The president signing a sweeping executive order focused on slashing red tape throughout the agency. But what might that look like and how are America's teachers reacting? We'll dig deeper as new questions arise over Elon Musk's role in the White House ahead of a visit to the Pentagon later today. Plus, a searing new federal report on the state of the nation's travel infrastructure. Comes nearly a year after the tragic collapse of Baltimore's Key Bridge, which killed 6 people. Why the NTSB now says dozens of other bridges are at risk for a similar disaster. The urgent calls for tighter safety measures. And later in the hour, we're tipping off what's already shaping up to be an electrifying March Madness. The upsets, the bracket busters, and the Cinderella stories that are thrilling college hoops fans across America. See, don't you wish you did a bracket now? No, you don't at all. It's just fun to look at the app.
I like
and
talking
be like,
about it. I like that you're happy.
I'm in
I like
last
that you're
place.
having fun. I like that everybody's in on it. I got enough of it.
We'll dive into it for those of you who are interested coming up in a little bit. Let's begin this morning with big news. A total shutdown at one of the world's busiest airports. London's Heathrow will remain closed all day after a fire at a nearby power substation caused a massive outage. A little earlier, the London Fire Brigade reported that 10% of the fire remains burning.
Wow, with more than 1,300 flights disrupted and major airlines warning of continued delays, the ripple effects are being felt worldwide. Officials say the airport won't reopen until midnight local time. It's 8 p.m. Eastern, leaving travelers stranded and global travel networks scrambling to adjust. Here's NBC News International correspondent Ralph Sanchez with the latest.
Hey there, London Heathrow, normally one of the busiest airports in the world, but this morning this is as close as you can get, and we are already seeing travel disruption worldwide with U.S. passengers from coast to coast facing flight cancellations after a fire broke out at a power station near the airport early today.
Oh my God, look at that.
This morning, a towering blaze shutting down Britain's biggest airport and unleashing travel chaos worldwide. London's Heathrow now closed for the rest of the day, with more than 1,000 global flights expected to be canceled or disrupted.
Yeah, it's tough. It's obviously a Friday, so, I'll still get home tomorrow, hopefully.
This was the moment planes in midair got the news Heathrow was shut. many of them turning back to the East Coast. The closure upending travel plans from New York's JFK to LAX, where Nancy Kawendo was flying to London en route to a safari in South Africa.
So all those plans have changed now, but now I'm at a point of acceptance. It is what it is. Yeah, a fire is unavoidable.
The flames knocking out power at the airport and triggering evacuations in West London. The cause unclear and under investigation.
It was a catastrophic fire at a substation, at the substation that serves Heathrow. Work is ongoing to get the fire, put the fire out and to restore power.
Airport authorities saying we expect significant disruption over the coming days, and passengers should not travel to the airport under any circumstances until the airport reopens. Heathrow was the fourth busiest airport in the world last year, serving around 230,000 passengers daily and a key global travel hub. It was last closed in 2010 after a volcano in Iceland erupted, sending up a cloud of ash that paralyzed global air travel for more than a week. And this morning, passengers around the world bracing for what may be days of intense travel disruption ahead.
Now, some 1,300 flights were scheduled to take off or land here at Heathrow today. Those are obviously going to be directly impacted, but there are going to be knock-on effects as those aircraft are out of place for their next flights. The advice from travel experts is to check directly with your airline if you think your travel plans may be affected. I'll send it back to you.
All right, Raf, thank you. And in a new development, London police say there is no indication of foul play in the fire that shut down Heathrow Airport, but that counterterrorism detectives are now leading the investigation. Writing in a statement, a spokesman for the Metropolitan Police said, quote, given the location of the substation and the impact this incident has had on critical national infrastructure, the Met's Counterterrorism Command is now leading inquiries.
Back at home, President Trump's billionaire ally, Elon Musk, is expected to attend a Pentagon meeting later today. That's according to 3 defense officials. Now, there are growing questions about Musk's expanding role in the government. There are also questions about what happens next for the Department of Education after the president signed an order to close it. NBC News senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez joins us with all the latest. Gabe, good morning.
Hi there, Joe. Good morning. U.S. defense officials tell NBC News that Musk is expected to get an unclassified briefing today at the Pentagon that will include China. But overnight, the president denying China will be discussed. It all comes as Musk's role has expanded, despite his businesses having massive contracts with the federal government. This morning, mounting questions about Elon Musk's role in the Trump administration.
He's a great guy. He's a patriot. He wants to see the country straightened out.
As the president's billionaire ally heads to the Pentagon today, NBC News learning from 3 U.S. defense officials that Musk will be at the military's headquarters for a meeting and briefing on topics including China. The New York Times reporting overnight that Musk would be briefed on the U.S. military's plan for any war that might break out with China, citing 2 U.S. officials. President Trump, Musk, and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth have all denied that report, the president saying China won't be mentioned. The Tesla CEO has taken on an expanding role within the administration, sitting in on cabinet meetings and addressing reporters from the Oval Office.
Because there's a lot of regulations that don't ultimately serve the public good.
His Department of Government Efficiency has slashed the federal workforce, but some Republicans have faced backlash at town halls, including a contentious meeting this week in Wyoming. Republican Harriet Hageman pushing back.
It's so bizarre to me how obsessed you are with federal government.
The president sees it as fulfilling a campaign promise, and his push to scale back the government is intensifying. Yesterday, signing an order pledging to dismantle the Department of Education.
We're going to shut it down.
Only Congress can abolish a federal agency. The White House acknowledging some parts of the department will remain, including student loans and Pell Grants. Conservatives have long argued that shutting down the department would give states more power over education.
They want education to come back to them.
Still, teachers and education workers have protested.
It's going to end up adversely affecting students in this country, across the entire country. Red states, blue states, doesn't matter.
Back to Elon Musk. Attorney General Pam Bondi just announced federal charges against 3 people nationwide accused of using Molotov cocktails to set fire to Tesla cars and charging stations. She called it domestic terrorism. The attack's part of a growing movement to target Tesla as a form of protest against Musk. Joe?
All right, Gabe, thank you.
Well, federal judge is calling out the Trump administration and demanding more answers after it missed a deadline to provide details about that deportation of alleged Venezuelan gang members to El Salvador.
U.S. District Judge James Boasberg had requested information after ordering the Justice Department to pause deportation flights. Those flights were being carried out under an 18th century law called the Alien Enemies Act. The DOJ had until noon yesterday to provide details about who was on those planes and why some of them apparently departed even after his order. In a 3-page ruling yesterday, Boasberg said that the government, quote, again evaded its obligations, adding the information provided by the DOJ shortly after the deadline passed was, quote, woefully insufficient.
NBC News legal analyst Danny Sabal is here to break this down for us. Hi, Danny. Okay, so if we could rewind a little bit, I want to start on this back and forth that we saw between the judge and the Justice Department over the fact that this order was first issued verbally. Explain the importance of that.
So this happens all the time. At a hearing, a judge and the litigants will say things back and forth, and the judge might say something, well, I'm going to order this, this, and this. And I even there's judges that I appear in front of who say, I'm not even going to do a written order, just order the transcript, and that's my order. The problem is, it's not as clear as a written order, which says things like, I hereby order number 1, number 2, and number 3. When you do it by transcript, you're left kind of divining what exactly the order is. Sometimes it's clear. Sometimes it's not. And that's really what the administration is seizing on. They're saying, hey, you know, everybody said a lot of words in this transcript, but what about this is clearly in order? We say it's not clearly in order. The real order to us was the minute order entry, which, by the way, is another kind of written order that just appears on the electronic case filing system. It's not a 4 corners piece of paper, but it's usually a summary of an actually filed order. So there are many different kinds of orders. The clearest one is one on paper that says, this is my order. A transcript can be one, but it's open to interpretation.
All right, so let's talk about where we're at now. The judge saying woefully insufficient. He didn't like that it was a 6-paragraph answer from the DOJ. Talk about why the judge says that was not sufficient. And just from a legal perspective, what's the DOJ's rationale? What's their argument?
The judge ordered someone to provide information, and the declaration that was submitted was by someone who said, well, my understanding is that the government plans to invoke the state secrets privilege. And that's kind of magic legal language when somebody's doing an affidavit or saying something to the court that they don't have personal knowledge of. This is a common issue. A lot of times people would submit affidavits, but litigants like me will demand, no, I want somebody with knowledge because there's wiggle room, right? There's a lack of accountability if you have an affidavit from someone who says, well, this is what I hear. This is what I think the government's going to do. That's not committal. And that's what the judge is saying. This is woefully insufficient because somebody needs to execute an affidavit with knowledge, and not just with knowledge, with personal knowledge. And that's why the judge said, go back to the drawing board. The problem, I get it. What the administration's trying to do is avoid a higher up, someone way high-ranking in the chain of command to issue or to submit a declaration. They'd rather have someone more low-level who you can say, well, there's not as much responsibility there.
Danny, the judge gave kind of 2 deadlines here, 10 a.m. today, but then also until Tuesday to decide if they'd like to invoke what's called the state secrets privilege. How would that work? What's that?
So there's a common law privilege. In other words, there's long existed a privilege where the government can invoke state secrets. They can say, well, we believe this will expose state secrets, so we have a privilege to not disclose it. The downside for the government is they're likely going to need an affidavit from probably the agency head. And that's, again, another level of commitment. That itself is a form of additional disclosure that the administration may be reluctant to engage in. But likely they will have to get someone with real authority, not just somebody who's a low-level field office rep, but somebody who may even be an agency head to commit to the state secrets exception.
All right, Danny, thank you as always.
Now to another alarming incident involving a passenger plane. This time officials say a Southwest flight in Florida nearly took off from the taxiway instead of the runway before air traffic controllers realized the mistake. That news comes as investigators released the preliminary findings about a crash in Toronto last month. We're learning more about what may have caused that Delta flight to flip upside down while landing. NBC News correspondent Maggie Vespa joins us now from Chicago's O'Hare Airport with the details. Maggie, good morning.
Hey, Joe, good morning. Yeah, a lot to talk about. We'll start with that Southwest flight out of Florida that, as you said, nearly took off from a taxiway instead of a runway. The NTSB and FAA both now investigating how the crew could have made that potentially disastrous mistake. This morning, questions mounting about another aviation incident, this time a close call at Florida's Orlando International Airport.
Stop 3278, stop. Stop with 3278, stop. Cancel takeoff clearance. You're on the hotel taxiway.
A Southwest Airlines flight heading to Albany, New York Thursday, abruptly halting its takeoff after the airline confirms the pilots nearly took off from the taxiway instead of the runway.
He was on the taxi lane and decided to take off, and was not where you take off, and then jammed on the brakes, and we just went flying.
The FAA now saying an air traffic controller canceled the takeoff clearance after the aircraft began its takeoff roll on a taxiway. Taxiways, typically shorter than runways, are not intended for takeoffs or landings. Southwest says no injuries were reported, and they arranged for another plane to take passengers to their destination. The FAA now investigating how it could have happened. This marks the latest in a string of alarming aviation incidents, including this jaw-dropping crash in Toronto last month. This morning, Canadian authorities shedding light into what may have caused that Delta flight to flip over while landing. Incredibly, everyone on board survived.
Our plane crashed. It's upside down.
The Transportation Safety Board of Canada saying in preliminary findings the plane was descending too quickly, setting off an alarm seconds before landing. As it hit the ground, they say the plane's right landing gear fractured and the right wing broke off, releasing a cloud of jet fuel, which caught fire. The report, including these never-before-seen photos showing that wing 200 feet away from the wreckage. Yeah, those are striking photos. Another detail, by the way, from that report that's making headlines. Investigators say the first officer on board that flight actually had less flight experience than the 1,500 hours generally required by the FAA for someone to serve as pilot or co-pilot. But the report also notes the agency makes exceptions for someone with what's called an airline transport pilot certificate, which, Joe, this first officer had. And one quick note for its part, Delta saying there's nothing more important than the safety of their customers, and they're still fully engaged with this investigation. Send it back to you.
All right, Maggie, thank you.
Well, it's been nearly 1 year since the collapse of Baltimore's Key Bridge that left 6 people dead and closed a critical port on the East Coast. Well, now the NTSB says that authorities failed to review the bridge's vulnerability to collision prior to the incident and is warning that more than 60 other iconic bridges across the nation could be vulnerable to similar tragedies. NBC's Tom Costello has more.
Yeah, good day. Very strong criticism from the NTSB chair saying that if Maryland had assessed the vulnerability of the Key Bridge before that accident, it might not have collapsed and people might not have died. And now the NTSB says other bridge operators nationwide need to do their own studies, do what Maryland failed to do, assess whether their own bridges are vulnerable to collision and collapse. It was March 26th last year.
The Francis Scott Key Bridge struck by a cargo ship and collapsing overnight.
An urgent search for the missing after a Singapore-registered cargo ship lost power and crashed into the bridge. Now the NTSB says the Maryland Transportation Department failed for decades to assess the bridge's vulnerability to such an event, despite helping to write the national guidelines that called for the reviews.
Had they done that, the collapse could have been prevented.
The NTSB says a post-crash analysis shows the Key Bridge risk was 30 times higher than the threshold. Overnight, the Maryland Transportation Authority writing in a statement, the catastrophe and the tragic loss of life was the sole fault of the Dolly cargo ship and the gross negligence of her owners and operators who put profits above safety. Now, the NTSB says 68 bridges in 19 states need urgent assessments of the risk of collision and collapse, from the Golden Gate and Coronado bridges in California to the Sunshine Skyway Bridge in Florida to New York City's major bridges. The Golden Gate Bridge owner says it has one of the most robust ship collision protection systems of any bridge on the West Coast, but it is conducting a review.
The entire Key Bridge is in the harbor.
In Baltimore, 6 construction workers died in the collapse. Fire Chief James Wallace was in command that day.
we go into these incidents, we want to save lives. They're very, very committed to it. They're very focused on those opportunities to save lives and make sure that we had no one left that we were able to rescue.
We talked to Governor Wes Moore before the NTSB issued its report.
We are going to make sure that we are going to get this bridge built on time and on budget. And it is going to make sure that it leads up to all industry standards on safety.
Now, the total price tag for rebuilding the Key Bridge thought to be $1.7 billion. It will take several years. Congress has already allocated the money, approved the money to do that. And now the government is suing the operator of that cargo ship to make taxpayers whole. Back to you.
All right, Tom, thank you.
Yes, it's spring and the temps are all over the map. Time now for your morning News Now weather.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of springish, right? Angie Lassman, good morning.
Very much so. Good morning, guys. We've got seesawing temperatures today and in the coming days, and it's really going to be a bit of a roller coaster ride for some spots. So remember that front that we were watching over the past couple of days? It caused a lot of severe weather. It's caused a lot of impacts when it comes to travel across the country. Now it's moving offshore. So this is where it currently is. You can see it's exiting. Behind that system, though, temperatures are going to be dropping. We're talking 20, 30 degrees cooler than what they were just yesterday. Notice behind that, though, we've got a high pressure that's going to swing in, and that brings our wind from the south, and that's going to increase our temperatures. So we're actually going to see those on the rise here as we go through the day today. So what does that look like actually in temperatures? 54 degrees in New York City. We've got 58 degrees in Washington, D.C. Boston tops out into the upper 40s. So it's not bad. It's not terrible, but a bit of a different kind of stretch of what we've been dealing with. As we look farther to the west, you can see temperatures into the upper 60s. We've seen a bit of a temperature rise there in Springfield and Paducah, 58 degrees in Indianapolis. So on the rise for folks there as well. And then we kind of keep it pleasantly mild as we head into the weekend and into early next week. So hanging out into those mid to upper 50s and low 60s for Des Moines as we head into Monday, upper 50s for Indianapolis through the weekend. Philadelphia tops out into the mid 60s both Saturday and Monday. A bit of a drop on Sunday as we get into those low 50s. And then kind of mild, honestly, across the southeast. Temperatures in the mid 70s for Charlotte. We'll keep that warmer air kind of in place for those weekend plans and plenty of sunshine for our friends there. On the West Coast, different story. We've got some of that moisture streaming in with this next storm system that has arrived and is going to bring us kind of some unsettled weather for folks there. And then, you guessed it, it's going to work across the country in the coming days and cause some bumpy weather for some folks. Today, though, it's the Pacific Northwest, Washington, Oregon, parts of the Cascades that will receive a good amount of rain and potentially some good snow, too, up to 20 inches in some of those spots. So we'll see that storm system work across the middle of the country for tomorrow. Not expecting a lot in the way of strong storms, but we could see a few of those happening late into the day for Missouri and Kansas. As we get into Sunday, that's when our severe weather ramps up. Texas to Kentucky, that's where you've got to watch for the hail, the wind, maybe a tornado or two, and then we will unfortunately deal with that heavy and wet snow for the upper Midwest. But get this, guys, blossom watch. We're on it. This is from yesterday, actually, and we're already at stage 4 out of 5. For those blossoms in Washington, D.C. And look at our average about late March. That's over the last 20 years. The peak bloom forecast for this year looks to be late March as well, so right on schedule. The latest we've ever done, April 18th, but that was way back in the 50s. Don't expect that to happen anytime soon. Yeah. And we've got some nice mild highs for that here.
Oh, good. So a good day to go out and look at the blossoms.
Of course. We were near 80 the past couple of days, so that kind of speeds up the process. Yeah. And here we go.
Did you say stage 4 of 5? There's like stages? That's cute.
Yeah.
Wow, it's so official.
You know, scientists, we've got to make everything
stage 4 of 5. Yeah. For the flowers. Thanks, Angie.
You're welcome.
All right, one day in March Madness is already thrilling fans and, of course, busting plenty of brackets.
Upsets are a given and always add to the drama of the biggest event of the year for college basketball. But maybe the story of day one was a lineup of coaching legends and storied programs that are back on the rise. NBC News correspondent Sam Brock is in Providence, Rhode Island, with more on the excitement of the opening round. Hi, Sam. Good morning.
Savannah, Joe, good morning from Providence. A couple of pretty big storylines from yesterday. One of them, McNeese State out of Louisiana, getting their first ever tournament win. They did it right on this floor, and it includes the viral sensation, their student manager. More on that in just a moment. But also, Savannah, those coaches you just talked about, iconic coaches, Rick Pitino, John Calipari, and Bill Self, all of them with more than 800 career wins, somehow in the same bracket, 2 of them squaring off here last night for a shot at cutting down the nets. The March Madness vibes are definitely back, and men's college basketball is leading with legends. Rick Pitino, John Calipari, and Bill Self all back to back in the brackets, with the latter two playing a late-night thriller. Calipari's Arkansas Razorbacks edging out Self's Kansas Jayhawks. The two longtime friends captivating college basketball.
I hate to play friends in this tournament. There's enough teams that I'd rather beat than a friend.
Arkansas now taking on Pitino and the St. John's Red Storm, which hadn't won a tournament game in 25 years before dispatching 15-seed Omaha.
My bracket, I've been winning it all. I'm going all the way, baby.
Pitino more than ready to make his mark.
But very happy with the win, very happy we're advancing.
Earlier in the day, there was some standard insanity, with little-known McNeese State knocking off Clemson in a shocker, coughing up most of an 18-point halftime lead before closing it out.
The kids believed and coaches believed and magic happened. I don't know what this March Madness is incredible.
Magic happened. And in a story made for March, McNeese's student manager Amir Khan has become a viral sensation from his love for the team, now signing endorsement deals. His face even adorned on the team cheerleaders' socks. Fans and players focusing on the mania and magic of arguably the most unpredictable tournament in sports. All right, guys, so you might be thinking it is day one, moving into day two. Our brackets are busted. Not really. The top four seeds from day one all advanced. There were only a handful of upsets, Drake and McNeese State being the most notable ones there. And speaking of McNeese State, and Amir Khan, their student manager, he is the first manager to ink deals for NIL name, image, and likeness. He had 3 of them so far and counting. Buffalo Wild Wings, Tick Pick, and Insomniac Cookies, my personal favorite. So he's putting them on the map, just like the team is as well. Joe and Savannah, back to you.
That is cool for him. And Sam, I'm just going to point out, because it's probably the only day I can say this, I'm ahead of you in the News Now pool, which I'm sure will totally change the rest of the tournament. But take some pride
Joe,
in that.
I couldn't see to a stronger, better, more knowledgeable
I'm not saying I'm
basketball fan.
leading. I'm just saying I'm barely ahead of you.
You mean me, Sam, right? Stronger and more knowledgeable. He means me.
Yeah, Savannah. I'm not worried about Savannah. Is that wrong? I feel like she's going to stay.
She didn't enter, so you're good.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, Sam. Appreciate it. Much more to come on this Friday edition of Morning News Now. A little later, we're watching the brewing business boycotts impacting big companies like Amazon, Walmart, and Target as they scale back, even eliminate DEI policies. But will taking your money elsewhere drive actual change?
First, though, after the break, the latest on the health of Princess Kate, 1 year after revealing she'd been diagnosed with cancer. What we're learning this morning about the tough few weeks leading up to that announcement. Those stories and more up next. Welcome back. Airstrikes from Israel have continued to batter the Gaza Strip as Israeli leaders demand the return of all hostages and the annihilation of Hamas. The renewed offensive launched earlier this week. It brought an end to the ceasefire with Hamas. With aid barred from entering Gaza and food supplies dwindling, the humanitarian crisis is pushing the enclave to the brink. NBC's Matt Bradley has more.
In the Gaza Strip, a deadly repeat of recent history, as Israeli forces filed back into the enclave, assuming the same strategic positions 2 months after they left as part of a ceasefire that has been shattered. Palestinian health officials in Gaza, which is ruled by Hamas, say more than 400 people have been killed since Israel scrapped the ceasefire Tuesday morning. Most of them women and children. But Israel's renewed ground invasion heaps new suffering on a civilian population already afflicted by starvation and thirst. Israel stopped aid into Gaza this month, they said, to keep Hamas from pilfering and profiting off the aid, and to pressure the group to release dozens of remaining hostages. But the decision sent prices soaring just as the Muslim holy month of Ramadan began. There's no life, safety, food, or water, says this man, none of the basics of life. This family lost loved ones and their home in an Israeli strike last year. Now they have nothing to shield them from the cold or the bombs. It's a far cry from Ramadan celebrations of the past. These are the worst days of my life during this month of Ramadan, says this grieving grandmother. In northern Gaza, a sea of children, little hands, desperately stretched for a small portion of rice. They've deprived us of many things. Vegetables unavailable, rice unavailable, everything is unavailable, says this man. This woman says she sold much sought-after gas, now 16 times its normal price, to feed her family. But this other woman says she can't afford gas, so she, like so many here, cooks over an open flame. I can no longer see properly because of the smoke, she says, and I lost 60 pounds since the start of the war. Food and gas prices are constantly rising. No cash flow, no banks, no jobs, no end in sight. The Gaza government media office on Monday cited initial stages of famine across the enclave. The people at this bakery have been waiting since sunrise, but they're walking away empty-handed. We'll starve, says this woman. In the end, people will eat each other. After being stalked by hunger and thirst, the people of Gaza are once again threatened with a violent death. Matt Bradley, NBC News.
Tomorrow marks 1 year since Princess Kate publicly announced in a video message that she had been diagnosed with cancer. Earlier this year, after months of treatment and time away from royal duties, the Princess of Wales revealed she was in remission. Since then, she has gradually resumed her public role. NBC News international correspondent Kelly Kobiea joined us from Buckingham Palace with a look back at her journey. Kelly, good morning.
Joe, good morning to you. I think a lot of people are surprised by just how much Princess Kate is taking on. 1 year now since she went public with her cancer diagnosis. And we're now learning that those days and weeks before making that announcement were really tough on both her and her family. Princess Kate stepping out on her own this week, a stark contrast to a year ago when she announced to the world she was being treated for cancer in a poignant video.
I should undergo a course of preventative chemotherapy.
The message came after weeks of speculation and conspiracy theories following Kate's abdominal surgery and disappearance from public life. This week's People cover story saying the speculation was overwhelming for Kate and her family, a roller coaster and a tornado. They felt bruised by it, one royal author told People, adding the hardest time for Kate was this time last year, when she knew she had the disease, but she couldn't talk about it. Meanwhile, people were saying horrible things online. The princess explaining last March that she and Prince William were trying to keep the diagnosis quiet until the school break.
And William and I have been doing everything we can to process and manage this privately for the sake of our young family.
All the decisions that Catherine and William were making about what to say, when to say it, what to share, what not to share, had the children at the heart of those decisions.
12 months later, the princess seems to be making up for lost time, once again back in the public eye. On Monday, inspecting the Irish regiment in her official role as honorary colonel, spending time with military families.
Do you like the idea of being in the army as well?
Sharing in a traditional toast. Kate making a comeback in her fashion choices as well, notably changing her style. The palace no longer sharing details of every outfit, saying she wants people to focus on the substance of her work, not just her style. A change in her shared events with husband Prince William, too. The couple appearing more openly affectionate, baking cakes in front of the camera last month. Kate openly praising her husband for his support, calling him a great source of comfort and reassurance. A royal watcher telling People there's a sense of protectiveness and partnership. The princess still putting her health and family first, but surprising many by stepping up her workload.
So many people are delighted about how she's coming back to royal duties.
A future queen redefining her role and more adored than ever. And Princess Kate is now the most liked member of the royal family, according to a survey on gov.org. I think that's the name of the organization. But according to the latest polls, Joe, and one royal author said she is the MVP of the monarchy.
Yeah,
Joe.
we don't need a survey. We know how much people love her right now, and we're glad she's doing so much better. Kelly, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Coming up, rally for release.
Yeah, a raucous show of support for Eric and Lyle Menendez. Family members making their voices heard after LA's district attorney threw cold water on efforts to re-sentence the brothers. We've got the very latest next. We're back with an update on Eric and Lyle Menendez and their push for freedom.
Yeah, family members and supporters of the brothers rallied outside of the district attorney's office yesterday. This comes just a week after the new DA announced he does not support the resentencing for the murders of their parents. NBC News correspondent Liz Kreutz, she's been following this story the whole time. She joins us live. Hey, Liz, good morning.
Hey, guys, good morning. Yeah, this rally was held in lieu of the brothers' resentencing hearing, which was supposed to happen yesterday and today, but has been delayed in part because of that decision by the new district attorney. The family and some supporters are now trying to keep momentum on their side as they look toward the new court date next month.
Members of the Menendez brothers family and advocates for criminal justice reform for the first time holding a public rally, hoping to ramp up support for Eric and Lyle's release after the Los Angeles district attorney delivered them a major blow, announcing he would not be supporting the brothers' resentencing effort.
We will not stop fighting for Eric and Lyle, for justice, and for the truth.
Eric and Lyle currently serving life sentences without parole for the 1989 murders of their parents, Jose and Kitty, in their Beverly Hills mansion.
Eric, we did it!
Multiple recent series about the case have ignited a new wave of interest in the murders and even sympathy for the brothers, who argue they acted in self-defense after years of abuse by their father. Supporters at the rally arguing their case deserves to be re-examined given the public's evolving understanding about the impact of abuse 30 years since their trial.
They are not the same men they were when they were 18 and 21 years old. They went through a lifetime of horrific abuse, and they acted in imperfect self-defense.
But District Attorney Nathan Hochman recently making it clear that's not how he sees it, instead saying the brothers told a litany of lies, including about the motive.
The Menendezes have basically engaged in not just the ultimate lie of self-defense, but a whole series of lies around it.
The DA saying he could reconsider his opposition to their resentencing if the brothers acknowledge and fully accept those lies, but their cousin dismissing that as a non-starter.
That would require them to really compromise their integrity and to turn their backs on their story. I do not see a universe where that would happen.
Now, Liz, the family still believes there are multiple paths forward for the brothers, we understand, like, for example, clemency from Governor Newsom. Where does that stand?
Yeah, actually, we spoke to one family member who said that she is most hopeful right now about that clemency bid, although the family is trying to remain optimistic about all of the paths. The governor says the risk assessments that he has ordered from the parole board that have to do with the clemency will be complete on June 13th. That is when the brothers will make their case to be set free. But even before that, the brothers also have their rescheduled resentencing hearing, and that is scheduled now for mid-April, guys.
Okay, Liz, thank you so much.
Coming up, fresh fallout for some of the major companies that are dropping DEI policies.
Now it looks like Black Americans across the country are taking their money elsewhere, but are boycotts really the first step toward actual change? We'll dig into that next. Welcome back. Many Black Americans are taking a stand against major companies that have changed or eliminated their DEI policies in recent weeks.
Yeah, we're talking about companies like Target, Walmart, Amazon, McDonald's, Google, and Meta. All of them scaled back their diversity programs in response to President Trump's push to end DEI in the federal government. The move sparked boycotts at some of the retailers from customers across the U.S.
NBC News Digital reporter Janelle Griffith and NBC News freelance writer Claire Retta Bellamy join us now on this. Hey there, good morning. Thanks so much for joining us. So I know you both spoke to nearly 24 Black people about how they're responding to these recent DEI cuts. Janelle, walk us through some of the common themes you heard.
Yes, Savannah. So a lot of the people we spoke to expressed disappointment, sadness. They expressed feelings of betrayal. And they also said, most of them, that they were inspired by the Montgomery bus boycott of the civil rights era, which we know lasted 381 days. And they said that they are committed to this. Some said that they're going to boycott indefinitely.
So, Claretta, for folks you spoke with, I mean, what's the primary goal of these boycotts? What else needs to happen for them to feel like success has been achieved?
I think the primary goal for these Black customers is to really get more people on board. A lot of them did admit that, a lot of people are joining, but in order to make a huge difference and an impact, we're going to need more Black people to join, and not just Black people, but more people in general to really get these companies to pay attention.
Janelle, do we have any idea of the financial impact from boycotts at this point?
That's a great question. It's actually too soon to tell. For it to have significant financial impact, it will probably have to be sustained. We're talking like 6 months to a year at least. And like Coretta said, it will probably have to have buy-in from other racial groups beyond the Black community.
Claretta, what so far is the most misunderstood part of DEI initiatives, especially in some of the conversations you've been having with people?
A lot of people believe that DEI is a shortcut. In reality, it's just giving people a chance. People who are, of color and from different backgrounds, it gives them an opportunity to be in the spaces where there's not a lot of people that look like them. So they really just want to support these programs and want these programs to be in place so it gives more people the opportunity to have, whatever job they want and whatever opportunity that, they're seeking.
Janelle, before we let you go, what are some of the companies who are keeping their DEI programs despite the Trump administration's effort to dismantle them? What are those companies and what are they saying?
So one of the major ones is Costco. And we heard from a lot of the people we spoke to, even empty nesters who having a Costco membership doesn't necessarily make sense, or people in single person households. They said they went out and got Costco memberships because Costco has maintained its DEI initiatives and has not backed down in the wake of these Trump policies.
And Claretta, do we have an idea of what's next for this boycott movement?
I think, again, more people just need to join. I remember one person during the interview just telling me that they want their Black dollars respected. And they're really just sending a loud, clear message. If you're not going to respect us, we're not going to be loyal to you. And I think that's really what it all boils down to.
Janelle, Claretta, thank you both so much for joining us. Great reporting on this. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
All right, more business headlines now. New numbers show Tesla owners are trading in their vehicles at record volumes.
CNBC's Silvana Henao joins us with that and other money news for us this morning. Hey, Silvana, good morning.
Savannah, Joe, good morning. Happy Friday to you. Yeah, so drivers have traded in a record number of Tesla vehicles this month, and that's according to data from Edmunds. This is amid the growing backlash to CEO Elon Musk's work as an advisor to President Trump. Now, Tesla cars from 2017 or newer accounting for nearly 1.5% of all vehicles traded in through mid-March. That's up from about 0.5% last year. Now, that would be the highest monthly share Edmunds has on record of Tesla trade-ins toward new or used purchases. Cox Automotive says Tesla sales likely fell 10% in February, hurt by declines in the Cybertruck, the Model 3, and the Model Y. Shares of Accenture tumbling yesterday as the consulting firm says efforts to cut government spending are starting to weigh on its financial results. Accenture is among the first corporate giants to get hit by DOGE, or the Trump administration's Department of Government Efficiency, run by Elon Musk. CEO Julie Sweet telling analysts the company's federal services business has lost contracts with after recent interviews. And people are turning to other forms of emotional support to help get them through their day. The top-selling plush toy on Amazon right now is a set of emotional support chicken nuggets made by toy maker Relatable. Each nugget comes with its own name and expression, and Relatable says they're both practical and adorable, bringing a little lighthearted support to you and your loved ones. And if you're not a nugget person, well, Amazon also sells emotional support pizzas, donuts, and dumplings.
Those are cute, but I like emotional support real chicken nuggets.
Same here, and real emotional support pizzas for me.
Exactly.
Please.
All right. Thanks, Savannah.
That makes me feel better.
Yeah.
Let's stay on your wallet for a little walk down memory lane. 1990s mall brands like Gap, Abercrombie, Old Navy, they're making a big comeback with the help of some innovative marketing. And these traditional labels are getting so hot, items are selling out.
Is this your sign to go shop at Gap? They're coming back, baby.
The Gap is back.
Do not sleep on Old Navy.
Along with Old Navy, Abercrombie & Fitch, and Levi's, classic brands all making big comebacks. Social media says so.
When did Abercrombie become cool again?
And now, so do the numbers. Experts say these brands, once mainstays of 90s fashion, lost touch with their customer base in the 2000s. But from 2019 to now, Gap brands are up 37%. Abercrombie & Fitch, a whopping 594%. And Levi's are bouncing back too. Style guru Zach Posen revitalizing and revamping Gap and its brand offshoots, Old Navy and Banana Republic, marketing to younger customers through a mix of nostalgia and social media. The Gap evolving from khaki a-go-go to Parker Posey, putting modern spins on its famous dance spots from the 90s and early 2000s. Abercrombie attributing its revival to a complete makeover, from their culture to their brands to an increased focus on customers. And then there's Levi's with the ultimate glow-up, revisiting vintage ads with style icon Beyonce.
Don't you wish you were my Levi's jeans?
Can you put into words just how dramatic the comeback is for some of these brands?
What these brands are doing that's smart is A, delivering great merchandise that's exciting. Some of it's quiet luxury, but some of it is fun fashion that you can get at an affordable price.
But the turnaround hasn't happened for everyone. In an industry often likened to a roller coaster, not all retail brands are enjoying the ride. Forever 21 recently filed for bankruptcy for a second time and has plans to close all of its stores in the U.S. And Macy's is closing 66 stores this year alone.
And every time I check the website, sold out.
But these stalwarts have once again nailed the alchemy between product and marketing, driving demand and even luring shoppers back into stores.
Shopping in person is way better than shopping online.
So what's old is cool again?
I love to say what's classic is cool again.
And it looks like this back-in-store shopping trend is set to continue. One survey by a mall industry group found teens and 20-somethings shop in stores about as much as their baby boomer grandparents. I'm not in my 20s, but this is an Abercrombie skirt I got in store, so I'm bought in.
Coming up, grab your Friday morning popcorn because it's almost time for our weekly can't miss list.
Yeah, the latest and greatest from the world of Hollywood and beyond. So what are we watching this week? We'll give you the rundown up next.
Finally this hour, it's Friday, which means it's time for your weekly can't miss list. All the movies, shows, and music you need to see and hear this weekend. And here to help us get through all of it is NBC New York digital reporter and friend of the show, Kay Ingram. Kay, good to have you with us. So, of course,
always great to be here.
We must start with Snow White.
Yes.
Is it the fairest of them all? Obviously, there's been a lot of controversy surrounding it for a variety of reasons. Now it's finally out. We're seeing the reviews. We're hearing what people have to say about it. Full disclosure, I saw it. I can share some thoughts in a moment.
I want to hear that.
But what are you hearing?
Yeah, I mean, you really touched on it, right? There's been a whole lot of controversy. The dwarves obviously are small, but the drama is big, and it's been going on for quite some months now. And so, essentially, sure, let's just talk about the film real quick. I'm sure Disney would have loved people to talk about this being a live-action remake of their 1937 classic. You know, it's also their first Disney princess. That's probably what they wanted people to talk about. But instead, it's been a lot about the controversy surrounding topics everywhere from Trump, Israel-Palestine conflict, feminism, what critics are calling wokeism in Hollywood. And so a lot of that has overshadowed the rollout. But really what you need to know is it's got Gal Gadot, Rachel Zegler, and then, you know, the dwarves, which the internet has some thoughts about them because they're CGI. So, but you saw it. What'd you think?
It's overall, I mean, it's getting, what, about 48, 49 on Rotten Tomatoes, and that seems about right to me based on it. I mean, I enjoyed some parts of it. Other parts of it I don't feel like added a ton to the story. I will say it's got new music, which is interesting. By Pasek and Paul. Those are the folks who wrote the music for The Greatest Showman and other things. So that is fun. The old songs are fun, and then you get some new music in there. So that's worth seeing.
All right. Well, I can't wait to see it personally.
All right. There you go. I think a lot of folks will be checking it out. All right. Let's move to something very, very different. It is called The Assessment. This sounds, I guess, frightening. It's about a couple that has to be essentially observed before they can have a child.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's exactly right, Joe. So it is called The Assessment, and it takes place in the future. You've got Elizabeth Olsen, and, you know, in it, she essentially is playing she's with Himesh Patel, and the two of them are this couple, and they're hoping to start a family. And in the future, what you have to do is go through this 7-day assessment to figure out if you're worthy or not to have a child. Interesting. I feel like folks who love Black Mirror are probably going to be into this because it's a little different.
Is it like a little Handmaid's Tale, maybe, or something?
It's definitely got the creep value. You know, they're definitely into it. And so imagine just having like a full-grown adult in your home, watching your every move, truly committing to the bit. So like acting as though they're a child. It's definitely interesting,
Yep,
for sure.
Let's go with interesting. I like that.
Yes.
All right, so the Alto Nights is a mafia, imagine this, a mafia story starring Robert De Niro. Imagine
De Niro v. De Niro.
We're playing two parts in this. First of all,
Yeah.
De Niro does not stop working, man. He is just nonstop in
He's in these mean streets again. He's back.
And now he's doing another mafia film, right?
Yes, he is. He's actually playing a crime boss, but he's playing two crime bosses. That's why I was saying De Niro v. De Niro, because essentially the two of them are going back and forth, trying to take over the streets of New York City from the 1950s. And, you know, you're getting gritty, you're getting nostalgia. And, of course, my favorite part, there's a moment in the trailer where you see, like, a close-up shot of spaghetti. So it really is that gangster mob feel. So you're getting a whole lot of that.
The
And then, of course, De Niro.
and- yeah.
Yes. And Goodfellas, the folks who did that are also part of this. So
Oh, wow. Well, that says a
unclear
lot
if
right
it'll live
there.
up to the hype. It
All
does
right.
say a lot, but TBD.
We'll have to see what happens there. All right, if you are staying in this weekend, we've got Good American Family. It's with Ellen Pompeo. It's not Grey's Anatomy. It's Ellen Pompeo in something that is
ditched the Scrubs.
not Grey's Anatomy.
Yes, she ditched the Scrubs show, but she is back in her narrating bag. She does have that moment. But essentially, if any of you remember the curious case of Natalia Grace, it's this gut-wrenching, interesting, wild story of this young woman. And essentially in this, Ellen Pompeo plays the mother, the adoptive mother of this young girl. And, you know, she has this rare case of dwarfism. But if you know that story, you know that it takes some wild twists and turns. And so, you know, Hulu saw the story, said this was made for a series.
Yeah, I
and that's
feel like
essentially what this is. So.
This is going to do one of those top stream shows, I think, on Hulu for quite some time to come here.
100%.
Let's lighten it up a little bit here. We've got a British comedy. I love British comedy. Ludwig, it's on BritBox. What should we know?
Yeah, well, the Brits do comedy well. You're
Yes,
totally right.
exactly.
I'm like right there with you.
As long as you have that good, dry sense of humor, yes.
Yes, and so folks are calling this the American version of Monk, or the British version, excuse me, of Monk. And so with it, you know, you've got David Mitchell, who plays this, now stick with me, he plays the twin brother of a brother who goes missing, and he has to essentially take his place to find the brother while also solving mysteries in between. I didn't give away too much. My producer, Chris, did see the series, though, or see a couple episodes, and he mentioned that it's a little bit of a slow burn start, but hang on, it gets juicy.
All right, it's got a little drama, got a little humor. That sounds good. Okay, we got
Got it
like
all.
15 seconds left here, but we should mention Selena Gomez and her fiance, Benny Blanco, have some music out.
They do, and they're actually here today. I don't know if you caught that.
They are
just on
visiting
today.
our friends at the Today Show this morning.
Yes, because they want to talk all about their new album, I Said I Love You First. And so it's from Selena Gomez. We haven't had an album from her since 2020, but the two of them are back. They're creating their first project together. Of course, they're engaged.
Love it, yeah.
Yes, and so that's out. You're getting 14 tracks, a total of like 34 minutes in total. And essentially, this is really her coming back moment, and fans are so excited.
All right,
So,
we'll
yeah,
check
merch,
that out.
music
All right,
videos,
that
all
is
the
going to do it
things.
for this hour of morning news now, but don't go anywhere. The news continues right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.